Um,
Need to use your mic's on? Okay, it
yeah, it's
seems
on.
kind of dull. Okay.
There we go. First and foremost, for anyone who was either here or listening in a few months ago in our last meeting, we did mention that open data and a data portal would be a topic of conversation ongoing in the future. It will be. Um, the reason it's not on the agenda right in the immediate is that Mike Lively, who was here for 16 years, has taken a new job at the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities. We'd like to congratulate Mike and thank him for his service to RTA for all that time. But in the immediate, we have a few things to sort out in terms of how the data portal or open data is going to go forward. So we will continue with more readily available topics of conversation. And to that extent, I will invite Josh Miranda and Alan Polly, the Director of Management and Information Services and the Director of Revenue Collection, respectively, to present to us on fare capping and the next phase of the Easy Fare project. So, gentlemen, floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Committee Chair Sleesman and the rest of the committee members. Today we're going to talk a little bit about fare capping, which has been an ongoing topic. Mr. Alan Polly is here with me. We're going to talk through some items that may require a little clarification, and we will kind of tag team this presentation as we go through the topic. So why fare capping? Fare capping enables customers to benefit from unlimited use pricing. So we have an all-day, 7-day, and monthly. We've spoken about this at a very high level historically, and we want to get a little further into details as to how this will work and who it will benefit. Ideally, customers don't need to know in advance how they will use the system, and they will still get the best rate for those services. So that would be in a daily, weekly, and monthly situation. No need to pay for those things up front. So if you ultimately needed to take a week off after you paid for a whole month of service, you would now see a benefit from that. Additionally, it improves affordability and equity for the low-income customers. So the customers who can only afford daily payments, that was their only way to achieve utilization of the system historically, can now see the same benefit that someone who paid everything up front. So in order to make this work, you need to implement account-based ticketing. So the Easy Fare product allows for account-based ticketing. This lets us know who's using the system and how often they're using the system. We have to enable fare capping rules. This means we need to agree that we want to fare cap and then how that fare capping ultimately is going to work. And then we need to use updated fare media. So that would include smart cards, our ticket vending machines, which we already talked about earlier this month, and then retail sales as well. So on the slide, we have a collection of the fare system. On the far left, you have the fare boxes, which still exist on the buses throughout the fleet. We have the Just Ride Validator, which is the electronic technology that ultimately will enable fare capping. And then we talk about codes and policies, which is where we need to put in language specifically around fare capping. And the mobile app will give you visibility on how those things function. Ultimately, the ticket vending machines are the existing units will only be able to operate using the legacy fare media, but the replacement machines we're working towards will ultimately be giving cards to be able to achieve fare capping with a piece of PVC or on basically an electronic ticket. So this is a diagram of the back office. A little difficult to see, but we wanted to show that it's a kind of a collection of systems. It's not a single system. So the pink in the middle is the Masabi hub. That's what enables for fare capping and ABT. It achieves that by using platform validators or validators on the vehicles. You can see on the far left of that chain is the TVM replacement. So when the TVMs come online, it will issue fare inside that ecosystem, so it will be native to the platform. On the far right-hand side is the existing GenFare, which is the fare boxes we looked at earlier. That's the green system. Those currently use magnetics, and they receive cash on board. What we would like to do is the proposed box is the green icon on the left-hand side, which is to introduce those into the ecosystem of the Masabi Hub by having them generate a QR code. So you could still physically get on the bus, you could still use cash locally, and then ultimately we would get a QR code so we then could scan you into the Masabi system. That technology has been deployed elsewhere, so we're not starting from zero. And then on the far left is the purple. The purple is what's known as partner portal, vendor portal, and customer service point of sale. So Masabi has created these other technology platforms to allow individuals to come in and utilize the system. The GCRTA has not yet adopted those fully because they don't follow the same procurement paths that we currently utilize. So we're trying to explore them better and understand how they can be utilized. There's some concerns about when a customer would pay or who would have the ability to issue tickets, and we want to make sure we fully understand that before we would offer that up to any of our partners. Ellen, anything else specifically on this slide you want to call out?
No, I'd just like to add that some of the options that are showing here, as you know, we're in the process of recommending a consultant to recommend the specifications for the new TVM. So some of this is kind of a wish list. So if we get everything we want, we will be able to marry all the systems. It would not be complete because the GenFare system, the cash part, would still remain separate. But if we can get the farebox issuing documents that the rest of the system can read, it would be better for everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to do an overview of what is account-based ticketing, or ABT. Account-based ticketing relies on back-office accounts linked to a single ticket or a token. Customer taps, scans the token, and fares are calculated based on usage. Fare capping is an optional feature enabled in ABT, so someone can still choose to purchase the electronic equivalent of what they would buy in the magnetic fare media, but it is a feature that we're offering to them. So fare capping requires accounts linking fare payments to a customer, so I can't fare cap you if I don't know who you are. So that's a critical component there. Accounts can have entitlements. So an entitlement would be a specific type of discount, whether that's a senior or a student. So we need to know that you're eligible for those discounts. And then tokens can include smart cards or mobile devices. So what you can do is you can log in and create an account. You can come in and validate that you are a disabled individual, that we're prepared to provide discounted rates, and then they will have that tethered to their account from that point forward. So when they tap at the gate moving forward, they're going to be charged the appropriate rate, not the full rate. Any questions around that footprint? Okay. So we're going to get a little bit into what does daily fare capping look like and try to give some examples to make it easier for folks. So in the slide on the left, you can see Sunday. Let's say you came in onto the system and you tapped the system 3 different times. So if you would do that currently, you would end up paying for 3 different trips into the system. The reality is you get a daily pass. So right now, daily pass happens relatively quickly. If you paid for 3 passes, that would equal $7.50. With the fare capping policy in place, you don't have to plan ahead. You get a $5 cost, and your total savings is $2.50. If you stretch that out a little bit, you can see how the savings add up. So in this situation, we're talking about a rolling 7-day fare. So if your first tap was on Sunday, you have 7 days to execute that full fare rate. So over the process of those days, it looks like you got a full day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On Saturday, you can see the cumulative would be a much higher number if you paid for each of those days, totaling $35. But we cap you at $25 through the system, and so you have a savings of $10 in that example. And then all the way to a monthly, so fare capping summary, there's your daily to 25 to get to the rolling 7, and then 4 rolling 7s would equal a monthly. It's a $5 light because that's our current cap. So that's in line with our current structures and fee rates. Any questions on the rolling?
Just a quick question, if I may. So I think numerically it makes sense, right? Just a quick question on, have we looked at other agencies as far as being able to be comparable as far as how we would structure it? Have we gotten that far yet?
We've talked to other agencies, specifically in the NeoRide group that we're with, who have rolled this out. Some of them have gone with a timestamp model. Some of them have gone with a daily model. Most of it had to do with how far from what they currently deployed did they have to move to introduce this to the public. So there's a public education piece here that the closer you make it to existing system, the easier it may be for them to adopt. And then the other piece is we want to kind of leave them on in parallel so that there's a natural adoption of it. So, hey, tell your friends that if you did this, you would get to 3 days or 5 days capping, and then you kind of get that to trickle through the system. They said just trying to campaign hasn't quite had the response that they were hopeful for.
Okay, and that's something that I just wanted to bring up when we get to that point, right? We're definitely in the beginning. We're in the infancy stages of talking about a lot of this, but the manner in which we actually decide to roll it out, I think has a huge impact on the adoption rate. And having been in other agencies that have gone to this, it can be a little rough in the beginning, especially if you have to be able to divulge certain identifying information about yourself. You get into a lot of Big Brother conversations. So just wanted to be able to put that on the radar as well. We may want to look at the best practices before we just jump into it, because it sounds great to those of us who are using technology all the time. But for those folks that are unbanked, and not necessarily in the best of situations to pay $95, may need a little bit more education on how it works. So,
Sure, fair point. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about phased implementation plans. So we talked about ABT and fare capping, and then the other piece that comes up is open payments. So in several board meetings, we talked a little bit about what's the next option, how do we make this even more easy to access. So in open payments, open payment, secure token associated with a device or item, back office links to the ticket or token, very similar to the ABT discussions we've had. Customer taps and scans the tokens, and fares are calculated based on usage. So the token devices can include a debit card, so that could be a bank card or a Visa card or MasterCard, QR codes, smartwatches, or mobile devices. The key limitations we need to be very mindful of are riders must use that same device item to benefit from any type of a fare capping option. So if you're not using the same thing, so if you smartwatched on the first ride and then you used your bank card on the next ride and then you got your phone out for the third one, the system is not set up in a way where they can easily track those taps. So we have to train the customer base to understand that if they want to use open payment, then you need to use that same consistent thing to achieve any value. And then this option cannot be combined with entitlements. So because we don't have any further information about you, it's very difficult to be able to allow entitlements that have been validated. And so we were going to charge you full fee on this, but we could still achieve the fare capping function, just to clarify that statement.
Gotcha.
And with that, we've reached any specific questions that you may have.
If I could add something?
Yeah, go
Chair?
ahead.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Chairperson Sleevesman, Ms. Terry, and members of the board and the community. I'm Fonse Caver, the Chief Operating Officer. And so I appreciate the presentation given by Josh. It captures our agency's commitment to creating an infrastructure here to move to account-based ticketing. I just wanted to add a component to this, which is that this item fits directly into our strategic plan. Our strategic plans calls for several policy and strategy oriented, one of which is to improve how customers pay. The information in how we think about the modern ways that customers can pay it originates out of one of our pillar studies, and I'm providing a bit of history. And one of those major pillar studies was a fare equity study. And one of the recommendations out of that fare equity study was to come up with a way, using technology, to be able to create fare capping. And fare capping, just so that some who may be listening may not understand, is a way that allows there to be equity across the payment structure of our fare. In our current payment structure, in order to get a discount by buying volume, one has to have all of the cash up front. What this will do is this will make this an equal playing field so that individuals who use the system frequently can build themselves up to have the discounts that would normally have come with one payment up front. And so I just wanted to add, as we have these discussions, that this is a pillar of our organization. From one of our pillar studies, it is a component of our strategic plan, and it's our commitment to making sure that we can use technology to bring about equity in transportation here in the region. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it. I know that we spoke about this the other day, but I know at the last meeting there was a question, and there also has been the question in the meantime of the validators at Tower City and where the testing of those stands.
Yeah, so I actually had some dialogue with the electronic repair team this morning. Doc, Mike. Absolutely. So had some dialogue with the electronic repair team. They have gone through the process of preparing every one of those turnstiles with the necessary data connections and infrastructure components that are necessary. The back office component is still being worked on with Masabi. We're giving them responses of what we need, and they're giving them back to us in a pace that's not exactly as quick as we'd like. So I proposed this morning that we increase the cadence speed of that to try to get a touch point once a day to get to the finish line here. It's not a ton of things that need to be resolved, but waiting a week to get a response is just too long. So we'll see if we can get that to move along. It's pretty close in terms of the pieces and parts we're still manipulating. And I know you've been working a little bit with Jim Young. Any specific comments around trying to get that buttoned down, Alan?
No, we're making sure that all the transfer rules function properly at Tower City, so nobody can go from an outbound to an inbound when they're not supposed to. They also can't scan on one validator and then scan another validator, let somebody else in. So we just have to make sure that all of that works the way it's supposed to, just so we're collecting all the fares that we can and what we're supposed to be collecting.
Thanks.
Sure.
Go for it.
Thank you for the presentation and overview and update this afternoon. I think that maybe there was a reference to it, but in terms of other transit systems that have implemented, fare capping, could you talk a little bit more about sort of best practices in implementation, best practices in practice? Have there been lessons learned, or is that still further research that's going to take place?
I can give you some preliminary information, but again, I think it'll be specific to our system. So everybody's feedback was it's all going to depend on your system. So some of the hub and spoke models that have gone about this seem to have an easier time because everybody passes a ticket vending machine or passes a specific point where they can get people engaged, use the card, and deploy that training at one point and get a lot of touch, right? People that are running elongated routes are really struggling to get that message of adoption out. People kind of show up and there's new tech there. If they've completely abandoned the legacy tech, there becomes lots of frustration, and the queue for complaints is very long. If they've done a decent job of marketing, then they do okay. The best practices from some of the locations are some type of an enticement strategy. Okay, you have X amount of dollars on legacy fare media, come and see our customer service agent, we'll help you transfer that to this card. Here's the benefits of doing that, and really handhold them through the process to make sure that they understand the tech. Most of them have cited that, I think they said for every 5 persons that you had an in-person dialogue with, you get 10 to 15 additional adopters because they're now conveying that message to other parties, and it's a interpersonal communication instead of receiving it from the company perspective, right? So that was a big concern. Definitely nobody was fans of the shut off the legacy and just run the new version unless you are fully committed to all the pain that will come with that choice, right? Because there will be lots of frustration and lack of ability to correct once you launch the product, right? Because your people that are early adopters will see all the benefit immediately, and trying to go backwards would cause even more heartburn. So those were the big points that they brought up. They did have some people that originally started with a hourly mark, so it was a 24-hour, and then those 24 hours cascaded from the first punch, but it created some very difficult abilities to explain why your ridership and nuances were different than the next person. So like support staff had to spend an exorbitant amount of time trying to explain to them, it's no longer based in a calendar day, it's now based in a from your first punch. So if you punched at 7 on this day, now you might be outside of your window on the following. It created a lot of discussion. So at first, face value pass, we thought that was an easier way to explain it, but ultimately people live within a calendar day. Typically, I'm going and I'm riding for that calendar day, and that's where I want to know where my capping starts and stops. Same thing with a monthly. Some people offer a 30 or 31 day approach, and that created the same problem. So if you started at the 15th day of the month, that could cascade you into the 15th day of the next month. And the biggest complainers in those spaces seem to be social service groups that might be trying to give a pass for a specific amount of time. It was hard for them to budget appropriately to make sure, okay, I have 30 passes for this month and 30 passes for this month, and it kind of just pivoted, it moved the goalposts, right, for lack of better language. Sure. Sure.
Go ahead.
So I'm Jonathan Cecil. If you have any complaints, I'm a direct report to Josh Miranda. If you have anything good to say, let India know. So your travel dollars at work, there were a few of us that were able to go to Apta Tech, which was in Philadelphia this year. And at it, SEPTA was talking about they're releasing a smart card 2.0 They're like, when we did it the first time, we thought it would go great. Now they celebrate every 0.5% they can get people to adopt it. They didn't do enough education and launch at the beginning. CODA just pushed out smart cards. They're trying to move the system. I think I saw today they're at 20% adoption. They said we didn't do enough. So what we're also doing is reaching out to those agencies and saying, what could you do? What would you have done? And then can we do it and get the marketing and the advertisement and the education so out of the gate people can walk in and use it instead of trying to catch up after.
So so Jonathan, thank you. I think that was a good comment, so pour it into me. So Jonathan works underneath the IT MIS blanket under Josh. I think that's a good point. I was kind of writing in my notes, and this is sorry if I didn't ask permission to go ahead and comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do think the adoption is the main point of all of this, and understanding that it might be something to consider for us to initiate some sort of peer review, if I'm saying the name correctly, through APTA, just because a lot of the agencies you mentioned are peers in that space, to be able to have some sort of research to be able to kind of back us up to what we know colloquially. And sometimes that can help us as well. It is about the education, just having gone through a couple of massive fare changes. Big or small cities usually doesn't matter. It's the kind of audience that you've got. The trust is a huge issue. So I think everything that was mentioned is right. The reliance on the system to reconcile the account issues is another thing that I have noticed in our industry. So whether or not that's us being able to answer a phone call, if that's even an option, which usually it isn't, someone has to, go online to be able to have a question as to what's happening with their account. If they have a question about, does it start on this day or this time, especially if they're a shift worker, which we have a lot of in our ridership, that makes a difference and it means something if your account ends at midnight versus 6 a.m. So I think we've got to be able to think about those things. Being able to have a live person to talk to, so training the trainer, even if it's, our charge to be able to answer something in an emergency situation. Emergency ride home becomes a big deal. If you have a person who is out there, right, out on the street, out on the road, needs to get on the service, what happens in operations, right? I'm kind of looking at all the ops people. Do we let them on? The adoption rate for the first, and don't hold me to it, but I'd say 6 months of a project like this, of any fare change, is usually, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Being able to say, what is the true adoption rate? Because there's usually a lot of forgiveness that happens, especially within the first 45 days of that. You end up giving out a lot of free rides sometimes, and while people are getting used to it. And then making sure that we do have that marketing out there. But I would say folks to even understand that we're telling the truth, that we're going to somehow not charge you again after that 25th day or whatever the mile marker is. And I think we do need to have that conversation from an equity standpoint for sure, with OEO, Title VI, Title VII, kind of understanding what those mile markers are and how do we determine what the best rate of return is for the customer. So it's going to take us a little bit of research, but that would be just my suggestion. But definitely the peer review, we may want to look at something like that.
That'll be me and Doc digging into scholarly research. Other than that, though, a couple things come to mind, and I'll start with where you just ended. I do think that when we get to this period of rollout, we should also look at that in terms of the grace period. This is what we'll do in this time. Quantify what it may or may not cost, but also kind of write it off of like, what, this will have gains in the long run in terms of adoption rates and community trust, et cetera. But if people are confused by it or whatever, that in the short term, at least whenever that happens, we'll be very understanding of the fact that this is a change and people have to get used to it.
And weather. I would also suggest not rolling this out in the dead of winter, if I can offer that, because everything's an emergency then.
Yeah, although we'll have to keep an eye on, I think, I was thinking of the school calendar as well, and how to whatever happens there in terms of students' use, or if that matters. The second thing, very different context, and to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we are or will do this ever, but Dayton did go cashless on their system, And again, we're not doing that. However, that was a huge change for them, and what they did in terms of outreach or messaging, there might be some nuggets in there in terms of learnings that they had with such a radical change that, okay, what did you find that worked? What kinds of meetings or information or avenues of disseminating that information, what worked? That might be something to look at. And then I have a quick question that both the Common and Social Services and also the shift workers, with the fare capping and/or smart cards, will there be an easy way? Could you essentially load someone else's account with the account-based ticketing? I was thinking about it when you said the social services. It could be like, okay, I don't need the pass that you may have bought. I need the credit on my account, like that kind of thing. Is that doable with an account-based system?
It is. So there's a custodial account. You can have a custodial manager with up to 4 individuals underneath them at this point. That's the structure they rolled out. So if you were the household, ease of explanation, if you're the head of household and you want to manage the tickets or value for those other parties, you can add value to the base account. What doesn't cascade, though, is fare capping is unique to each rider. So they still have a token. So
Right.
mom, dad, son, daughter, son achieves fare capping that day, daughter, mom don't, right? So the next person to tap doesn't automatically get fare capping. They'd have to be that right person, just to clarify there. So the cost center would be the same, the load of value would be the same, primary parent account, but everybody would have a unique footprint there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Sleesman, Ms. Terrier, members of the committee. Wanted to, Mr. Sleesman, just kind of talk about the cashless context that Dayton went through. And as we have looked at equity throughout improving how customers pay, we have sought to look at technology as an enabler, but we've also wanted to look at it as an equity component. And so we think of the future of fare payment in RTA through various customer profiles or archetypes. One is that we recognize that within our community, we will always have a cash paying archetype, that there will be some units who will always pay with cash. Another is the magnetic strip card customer, right? Hey, I just like to pay my fare downtown at the TVM. The next is the customer who rides a bit more frequently. Kind of think of the experience that you have in New York or DC with your, or Atlanta with your Breeze card, that will say, hey, I'll get a thicker plastic style tap and go card, and I'll just load it when I come down. I'll put $10 in when I take the train. And then you get to those customers who are willing to have an account-based system. We believe that some of the ones who currently have payment on their phone would find that an easy transfer, and Raj might be able to tell us the percentage of customers who are paying through the app portion. But we'll have that person, and that person has some confidence that their individual device will always be working, right? So one of the fears of if I'm going to load and have my transportation there is how well is my cell service? Will I always have the cell phone cut on and things of that nature? And while we don't have it now, sort of that most futuristic customer is the Apple Pay-ish customer, right? Just comes in and just keeps tapping their phone. And so we have when we look at the fare, improving how customers fare, the service that we have with Masabi, and trying to marry that with our old register and fare boxes, which is, I'm thinking Odyssey. What is the name of the company? GenFare. We want to merge them, but there will be a place for everyone in our community to come in into the style of payment that they prefer. And so you'll see varying levels of payment for individuals. Based upon their archetype, there will be some that will stay there. There'll be some that'll try to move forward. But we want to have a system that is that can expand, that can take advantage of the new technology, but that never leaves the customer base behind, and their ability and comfort with how it is that they part ways with funds. You asked one question about, so how does people find a way to upload their cards? So the Masabi cards, when we get them, will have a mechanism to be uploaded through some community partners. I forget the name of it, but think of it in
Point of sale?
So it'll be done at the point of sale, Vanilla Direct. Yeah, thank you. And Vanilla Direct is the company that sells gift cards throughout the market. And so Family Dollar would be a local chain that would have the ability to load money onto a tap-based card. And so I want to just share that we are looking at the system to take advantage of all of the technology and the benefits that has happened, but we're also looking at equity where we don't want to leave customers behind. And as I mentioned at the board meeting, we will always have a mechanism for customers to pay by cash, because that's an important component of our ridership and our community's way of dealing with transit.
Yeah, thanks for reinforcing that point. And for clarifying about the Masabi cards. My only comment to that would be we should think about. I wouldn't ever say that we shouldn't have so many ways to address all of the customers that want to pay in different ways. We might want to think about having, though, here's the suggested default, for communicating of this is the easiest and best way to do it. Just do it that way. Because I know if I walk up in a city I'm not all that familiar with, or a system I'm not all that familiar with, and it's you could do this or this or this or this or this, I'm just going to get confused and bewildered and be like, all right, whatever. Whereas if it's hey, look, this is the easiest. By the way, you can also do these things at the bottom, but let me just show that to you. That would also be, I think, very user-friendly for as we go about this, and trying to make that, yes, all of these avenues available, but also make it as user-friendly for each of them to be used.
And how we've communicated that over the last several years, we try to communicate movement to the app. And so I'm going to just describe some more things that we've researched. So we've done some research on customers and how customers pay. One of the things that we've found is that adult customers do not like the feeling of not, I'm going to use a double negative here, not knowing how to pay for something, right? And so what the science of customers says is that, hey, if adult doesn't know how to pay it, they won't actually spend the money. And so think of the example that one would use would be a taxi versus Uber. The Uber doesn't automatically, it isn't automatically cheaper than a taxi, but most of us don't want to go to New York and find a fare payment process that says, hey, it's $4, plus if you're in this zone, it's going to be another $1.50, and if you go past 7 miles, it's something else. And even if the number comes out cheaper, most of us don't feel comfortable with not knowing how to pay and what the cost would be. So a place like Uber offers, not that it's automatically cheaper, is that it just says $13. It doesn't tell you the algorithm of how to charge you by the first quarter mile plus the others. We also find that, and Amazon would be a good example, that the easier you make it to pay, the more people spend, right? And so you go from, hey, you got to go in and put all of your information and put it in a cart, to just one-tap payment. And then the most advanced of an Amazon-type payment process is you don't even have to ask. We'll just charge you every so often, and you'll get a little bit of a discount. And so we'll just charge your card. So it's a subscription-based payment style of payments. And so when we look at our customer base, and we look at what's important here, is that if we can continue to make it easier for customers to pay, and one of our defaults is driving folks to the app, because the app then allows the customer to be able to do so and figure it out in the comfort of their home, not at the bus stop where they're the person trying to figure out, how do I pay, what does a bus stop cost, sometimes feeling the stressors of that, and therefore it'd be easier for them to take an Uber or easier for them to find another way. We want to make that easy, and so we try to drive folks when they're coming to the Browns game to use the app. They could figure it out before they get there, and then more than likely, once they figure out it's easy, continue to use it. But there's a big fear for adults, and probably we've experienced it when you go to New York City and you see the bank of payment machines and you don't really understand how to pay it. You kind of would rather have found an easier way. Now, we're transit professionals, so we can figure it out pretty quickly. But what we know in the science is that adults do not like not knowing how to pay. I'm using a double negative, but I can't figure out how else to say it.
Yeah, it's understood, and also to know that you have an easy way to pay, very predictable, and in our case, you won't pay for something you're not using because by the nature, especially of fare capping, it's like, all right, you're getting charged as you're using it, and then you get to a point where that's that for the time period. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you again. This is, I think, just a general question building on Chairman Sleesman's comment around, again, wanting to ensure that there are those options. Is the thought process, though, over the long term, and maybe this has to be somewhat iterative with changes in technology, changes in preference, but is the idea to sort of funnel preference, at least over the long term, in terms of payment?
Yes. Right. So it's most costly to collect cash. So you, just like any private sector business now, you go to the, I won't go the long way of it, but when we have special events at the Browns games or at the Guardians, those places are now cashless, right? So they send you a letter, hey, it's a cashless facility. You can't purchase food here with it being cashless. So we had to upgrade our ability to have customers have cashless processes to come to the Browns game or the Guardians game. And so the goal would be to hope that customers migrate away from cash, but given our industry, we won't be able to ever have that. So we want to make it as easy for them to use other tools because cash is the most costly way for us to collect money.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we talked about this the other day too, that it's costly to collect cash, and also the operational benefits to having a just get on and go. You're validated. You have longer dwell times if you're collecting cash on the vehicle, and issues like that that will affect. They'll sort themselves out over the long term when it comes to the finances and economics of it, but that'll also have benefits in the long run. There was also, we spoke the other day, the open payments and credit cards aren't in the immediate, I know, but we're going to get to that point. And the other thing that we talked about, at least, was incorporating this into the paratransit. I don't know if you wanted to give commentary on that or.
Here we go. Sure. So currently we're looking at using an application to be able to achieve the fare capping function for paratransit. On some of the vehicles, it's real difficult to mount a device and still maintain safety and access concerns. And so they have an application they're going to share with us to allow for that validation. We still have to quality control how that's going to work. But everything else that's in the fleet except the 7600s has the ability to do this right now in terms of infrastructure. So that's, I think, 12 units at this point. It's a pretty small population, and they are end of life, so they should be dropping off as well.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
All right. That's all I had. Do you have any other questions or comments? All right. Teresa, are we doing public comment?
In the back, do we have anybody on the phone?
There are no callers.
And we don't have anyone, no one submitted a web form comment.
Okay. Well, with that, unless there are any others, I will move to adjourn. Do I have a second? Well, that's that. All in favor? Yes. None opposed, obviously. And with that, I will adjourn at 4:42, the Ad Hoc Technology Committee meeting.